You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. In today's episode, the Spurs got lucky in the lottery and landed the second pick. The Spurs' options with their draft picks. Who is Dylan Harper? Mapping out the rest of the offseason until the NBA draft in late June. On Monday, the draft lottery took place. The Spurs, let's first focus on the Spurs' 14th pick, which was the pick that they're getting from the Atlanta Hawks. So that pick had a 96.6% chance of going 14th. It did go 14th. That was the first pick revealed there on the broadcast. So, that wasn't too much of a surprise. That wasn't shocking news that the Spurs got the 14th pick from the Hawks. And that just shows that if you go in with 14th pick odds, in the last 7 drafts, the 14th pick ends up being the 14th pick there 7 out of 7 times since the NBA changed their lottery odds. So again, that wasn't too surprising. But the big surprising news was that the Spurs made a big jump from entering the lottery with their own pick, which was supposed to be 8th. They had the 8th pick odds. Well, the draft starts taking place, the picks start getting revealed, and then all of a sudden they go to commercial break because the Spurs, along with the Charlotte Hornets, Philadelphia 76ers, and Dallas Mavericks, had all jumped into the top 4. So the Spurs knew for sure going into the TV timeout that they were going to be having a top 4 pick, which we didn't know which one. And that was really bad news for two tanking teams like the Utah Jazz and Washington Wizards, who had 2 of the worst records this past season, to try to get a top 3 pick. And no, even though they had really good odds, 40% odds, they didn't even get a top 4 pick. They both fell out. And that's why the Spurs, Mavs, and Sixers were all 3 teams that jumped in ahead of Utah and Washington. So again, going into the TV timeout, the Spurs they knew for sure they were getting a top 4 pick. Now, once the last 4 picks were revealed, we found out that the Spurs did land the 2nd overall pick, and Dallas got really lucky and got the 1st pick. But still, that was a big get for the Spurs, the fact that they moved up from 8th odds all the way up to 2nd, and they only had a 6.3% chance, San Antonio, of landing that 2nd pick. So again, they did really well there. They were just as lucky as some prior teams who have jumped into the top 4. Very similar to what happened with the Memphis Grizzlies years back in 2019 when they moved up from 8th to 2nd to draft John Morant, and then also the Hornets a few years ago went in with the 8th pick odds, and they jumped up to 3rd to draft LaMelo Ball. So again, the Spurs were the 3rd team in the last 7 years to jump up into the top 3. From the 8th pick odds. So San Antonio got very lucky, and that obviously, had a big impact on now, not only the prospect they can draft, but also if they look at trade scenarios as well, now that they moved up to 2nd. So let's talk about that. So as soon as the lottery was over, of course, there was immediate speculation, both from media, from reporting from other writers about the front offices discussing things. And so, the big speculation, of course, is the Giannis Antetokounmpo that, as soon as the Spurs got 2nd, right away, San Antonio's name jumped out that they're one of the teams, going into the draft, they were already one of the teams who have the draft assets, the young players to go get Giannis if he has to out of Milwaukee, along with teams like the Houston Rockets and Brooklyn Nets. So, just the fact that the Spurs got an even better pick than 8th, that's what we kind of thought going in was what they were going to have. They got the 2nd pick. That made, the speculation jump even more to saying that, that could be a pick that can be included in a potential Giannis package. Even my own reaction, I wasn't, I said, yes, this can definitely be a pick that they can use if they want to go after Giannis, if he has to get out of Milwaukee and the Spurs have interest. But also my early reaction, again, this is just, moments after they got the 2nd pick, was like, oh, hey, I didn't expect them to get, the 2nd pick in the draft. Maybe they should look at a position of need like wings. Someone like Ace Bailey, who right now is mocked to go 3rd, to actually go after that wing shooting, and maybe not go after Dylan Harper, who is mocked as 2nd, just because they already have, Stephon Castle. They already have De'Aaron Fox, some scoring guards on the roster. But then as the week continued to go on and, reality started to set in, things kind of got a little bit slower. We did start to see that, all the mocks, the clear consensus number 2 favorite is Dylan Harper. And so that's kind of where my mindset as well has changed a little bit, where just my opinion, I think that, he's going to be, according to the mocks, he is the 2nd best prospect after Cooper Flagg. And so based on the tape that I watched of him already, and I'll talk about him in a little bit, I do think that if they're going to keep the pick, the Spurs, they do need to go after Dylan Harper. He does look like the clear-cut favorite right now for that 2nd pick, but again, as reality set in that and things kind of slowed down a little bit and, the rumors kind of went away, that's kind of where everything stands. So now I want to talk about the Spurs' options with their picks. So let's begin with the 2nd pick again. So option 1, which is probably the safest pick, is to just draft Dylan Harper. So again, that's the most the most likely option, the most the safest option. So let's just talk about this scenario. So again, all the mocks do point to Harper being the second best prospect behind only Cooper Flagg, who's going to be going first to Dallas. Now, also, a draft analyst, who's very plugged into with other organizations and things like that, is ESPN writer Jonathan Givony, who is one of their best draft writers over at ESPN, and one of their he scouts different players all over the world. Anyway, here's what Givony said from the combine this past week on a broadcast. He said this. He said, "Dylan Harper is going to be the number 2 pick in the draft. I am 99.9% sure about it. The San Antonio Spurs are signaling to teams that they are very excited about the opportunity to draft Dylan Harper. They are not pursuing trades from what we're hearing. They think they can play Harper together with Steph Castle and De'Aaron Fox in the same backcourt." So again, that was Givony, again, who's very plugged into the draft world, saying that Harper again is the clear-cut favorite, and in his opinion, almost 100% chance he does think that Harper's going to go number 2 to the Spurs. And right now, at that moment, during the middle of the week when he gave that comment on the broadcast, he was basically reporting that the Spurs weren't looking to trade that pick and that they were going to be happy with Harper. So just continuing with the Harper angle here, I would just say too that there's going to be some pressure for the Spurs to again go with more so like the consensus, which is Dylan Harper, and not really Zach, not look at maybe somebody like Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe or some of those other players out there, that are not the clear-cut number 2. But again, I do want to say that the Spurs will do what they always do in the draft, where they're going to do their homework, where they're going to talk to their scouting department, look at what their scouts have said over the years, scouting these players. They're probably gonna have their chance to interview some of these players. They're gonna look at what data and observations they got from the NBA draft combine, where Harper and a lot of the top 10 picks were present. And then also, of course, they're going to do their own homework, which is digging into a player's background as well. So again, like the Spurs have always done throughout each draft, as they've talked about, they'll continue to do that. But again, right now the consensus looks like it is Dylan Harper, and if the Spurs were to zag and go after someone else, that puts a little bit more pressure if that player doesn't shake out to be one of the better prospects, down the road. That's a little bit more risky of a gamble, it looks like, early on. However, the second option the Spurs have with this pick, number 2, is they could trade the pick. Again, this doesn't look like the most likely option right now, but it is an option that's out there. And of course, just in my opinion, I do think that if they are going to trade this pick, it would have to be for a superstar, not just an all-star or a former all-star. It has to be a player who's one of the top players in the league. And of course, that one player who might be available is Giannis Antetokounmpo. So what we know about Giannis' situation is that according to Chris Haynes, Giannis will be meeting with the Milwaukee Bucks this coming week, where he is going to talk to the Bucks' front office about what's their direction. Do they have a chance to still put a championship roster together around him? And if you want to talk about why I think that's very difficult for the Bucks to do, you can go back and listen to last week's episode where I kind of discussed the Bucks' front office situation, with Dame hurt, with not a lot of financial tools, resources available to really upgrade the roster, and a lot of draft picks either to really make big trades going forward, especially with Dame hurt. So again, I had talked about all those angles about the Bucks' situation and why it's difficult to build another championship team around Giannis in that last episode. But again, we'll get a clear-cut answer most likely this week, where reporting might come out from Shams or Chris Haynes, breaking Giannis wants out of Milwaukee, and then you might see just names, teams kind of thrown out there, or maybe a list of teams that Giannis wants to go play for. Or it could be that, hey, Giannis is staying loyal to the Bucks. He thinks they can stay. They talked to him, they gave him their plans going forward, what possibilities there are to continue to try to compete for championships, and so maybe that he will give them another shot this coming year and stay with them. So again, that news could come out this week. And of course, if it comes out that Giannis wants out, you're going to see, like I mentioned last week, that the Spurs' name is going to be linked to the Bucks, the Giannis situation, just because of what they have. They're one of the teams, along with like the Houston Rockets, the Brooklyn Nets, who have draft picks. They have some young players. So again, and then just the fact that the Spurs got the number 2 pick, that makes that makes a potential trade package look even better for Milwaukee's situation if they were going to look at moving Giannis. So again, even if right now, again, like Givony said, right now the Spurs aren't looking to trade the pick. They're going to continue to probably be in this rumor mill with the Giannis situation, unless it becomes clear that we get word this coming week that Giannis does not want out of Milwaukee. He wants to stick it out another year. And then I think a lot of that those trade chatter for the number 2 pick kind of goes away. I think that then it just becomes more clear that probably the Spurs are going to stay with option number 1, which is the safe option, and just stick with drafting Dylan Harper. But again, we'll kind of get those answers this coming week if we do get word that Giannis wants out or he wants to stay with Milwaukee. So again, that's where that situation stands with the number 2 pick. The options with the 14th pick for the Spurs, which they have again from the Atlanta Hawks. Here are some players that are currently mocked at 14. When I ran my mock simulation this past week, there's 6'9" Noah Essingu of Ratio Farm Ulm. There's 6'9" Igor Demon of BYU. There's 6'8" Carter Bryant of Arizona. There's 6'3" guard Jace Richardson of Michigan State, and then 6'10" Joan Behringer of Civita Olympia. All mocked on different mocks to the Spurs at 14. Again, those are just the initial mocks. I do want to say that I will be doing some homework on these players, scouting these players, watching some tape, and kind of figure out who they are and maybe who is one of the better prospects there at 14 for the Spurs. But the Spurs' options here could be. They have two choices, obviously, here too as well. With 14, they can draft a player, or they can look to trade. Either trade down in this draft, maybe take the 20s and get a pick in the 20s plus maybe another future first, or maybe 2 seconds. They could look to trade into a future draft, down the line, like they did last year with Minnesota when they traded. They drafted Rob Dillingham for the Wolves, and then the Spurs got a future pick from Minnesota. So again, there's different options that they could go with that 14th pick. If there's not a clear-cut player that they have in mind there, they could look at trading that pick either down in this draft with more assets coming in, or for a future pick as well, to kind of just keep that future draft asset chest filled with just different options for the remaining career of Wemby when they can make bigger trades later on down the road. So yeah, those are the two options that they basically have with 14, that 14th pick. So again, we'll kind of see what happens. And I will say too that we have seen this front office, GM Brian Wright, be more active in trades, like we saw last year with him trading that second first top 10 pick last year as well. So Brian Wright will has made several trades already in his career as the Spurs' GM. So again, that's not something that would be surprising if San Antonio trades out of the 14th pick. And then also the Spurs will have the 38th pick in the second round of this draft. And right now, there's the second round's always tougher to call about, who the Spurs might take or which teams might take who at second, just because there's players all over the board in that range. Could be bigs, could be wings, could be guards. Right now, just based on some of the players I watched in college, one of my favorite players, and I will do more homework on this player and other draft prospects, is Chaz Lanier from Tennessee. I just think that the Spurs definitely need outside shooting, and he's one of the players that I really liked, watching at Tennessee for his outside shooting ability. But again, I will do more draft scouting for this upcoming draft and seeing some prospects who could be there at the 38th pick range. So again, those are the options for the Spurs with the second overall pick, the 14th pick, and also the 38th pick. Let's keep going. All right, so now let's go to this situation. The Spurs, maybe it comes out that Giannis wants to stay in Milwaukee, so he's not going to, the Spurs aren't going to be looking to trade him, and the Spurs end up, going with Dylan Harper. That's what the clear reporting is, that they want to take Dylan Harper. So in this situation, let's just talk about who Dylan Harper is. I do want to say that I did watch an extensive film on him, and for me, when I scout draft players, and I did this last year too, and I got a better feel for like who Stephon Castle was coming into the NBA. I like to watch full games. I don't just like to watch the highlight videos or things that people put together, just because you miss a lot of I just like to see what players are doing when they're not on the ball, when they're off the ball on defense, on offense. How engaged are they? How active are they? What position are they guarding out on the floor? Is the coaching staff giving them the main defensive assignments? Are they just kind of guarding like corner shooters, basically? Weak side players. So that's why I like to watch full games. So I watched multiple full games from Rutgers this past from this past season to kind of get a better feel for who Dylan Harper is as a guard. And so that's kind of where I want to start here. So again, if you want to read the full scouting report, it's over on the spotupshot.com. I just dropped that on Saturday. So I'm just going to kind of give us a quick breakdown of who Dylan Harper is as a player and kind of how he would fit with the Spurs based on my scouting report. So he is on paper listed as a 6'6" guard. He's a very versatile scoring guard from New Jersey. He played at Rutgers this past season as a freshman. He's only going to be 19 when he enters the NBA on day one in October. So that means that by age 22, in 3 years, he'll already have collected 3 years of NBA experience when he'll be up for his rookie extension. At the draft combine, he was measured without shoes on, and so his height ended up being 6'4.5". So basically, you had like that 1 inch with the shoes, so it's like 6'5.5". So again, that's why he's like 6'6", is basically rounding it up. So he's more of like a just rounded up 6'6" player. He he also has, according to Draft Express, he has the physical body measurements of Dwayne Wade coming out of college. So again, when you think about physically, what does he look like? His body, wingspan, hand size, height, those kind of things, those kind of measurements. Think of like a rookie Dwayne Wade coming into the league, according to Draft Express. Some of his base stats here: he dropped 19 points per game for Rutgers, 4 assists to 2.4 turnovers, 4.6 rebounds, most of those on the defensive glass, 1.4 steals, and then he played in 91% of his team's games, started in 28 of them. And so when we look at his shot diet, he was mainly an attack inside first player, where 63% of his shots came from 2-point range, which is driving inside, getting into the paint, or going to the mid range, and then 37% of his shots came from 3. So again, he launched about 5 threes per game. He shot 33% on his threes and then 57% on his twos, which is really nice efficiency on his twos. He also is very similar to like Stephon Castle in the fact that he can get to the free throw line. He drew 5.8 free throw attempts per game and made 75% of his free throws. So again, he can get to the foul line, can be a little physical when attacking. One thing I talked about in the scouting report was that I've been reading this book by Dean Oliver, and Dean has worked for multiple front offices in the NBA, and so he talked about one of his experiences with the draft was when they were putting together the team that he was with, when they were putting together their scouting report. He wanted to see, of course, he just gives the description of the player, who the player is, but then also there was 3 key questions that they use in their scouting reports, and this is kind of what I applied to Harper. The first question was, what does the player do to get himself in an NBA game? And so again, for that question, the answer there is, Harper is a versatile lefty scoring guard. You just know that when Harper gets in the game, he's going to get you points, get you buckets, and he has different ways of doing that. He can be a downhill aggressive player who can kind of score inside. He's a lefty, so he tries to get to his left, but he can also finish going to his right. He uses like the spin move to get by defenders. He uses hesitation. He can reset the pick and roll. Drive in off DHO action. He can also use a step back to get to the mid range. That's a shot that he has, and that shot, his mid range shot, his little step back mid range, reminds me a lot of like James Harden kind of shooting, just because he is a lefty. But then also he has the ability to shoot the 3 ball, where he can shoot the spot up shot. That shot looks a little bit more like Harden as well. He can go to the pull up 3. He can go to the sidestep 3. There's a lot of different 3-point shots that he has in his arsenal, and he's not afraid to pull them. And the thing about Harper is a lot of the shots that I watched him make is that even though, yes, the college line is only 22 feet out, it's not like the NBA where it's almost 24 feet. He took like his threes like 2 or 3 feet away from the actual line. So he's basically comfortable shooting that NBA range, which is basically at like 24 feet from the arc and 22 feet from the corner. So again, he has those 3 areas of how he's able to score. Plus, he can be physical with his size there at 6'6", 215 pounds to draw contact going inside. He's aggressive, and so he gets himself to the free throw line. And then not only that, with his passing ability as well, he can run he can run the point guard position. Plus, he can also he's comfortable playing off ball as well as like a combo guard. So again, that's more so where he would be as like a combo guard. And so there too, he's able to find teammates. He's able to kind of drive in, draw in 2 defenders, kick out to like the corners, kick out. One thing he does pretty well is he drives in, draws in like 2 or 3 defenders. Then he'll find like a big or a wing cutting, and he can throw that pass to them. He can throw the alley-oop pass to cutting players. And then out in the open court, he's very dynamic, where he can really turn on the jets. He shows a speed burst when he gets in the open court by being able to finish with layups and dunks. Also being able to throw alley-oops to his teammates, or finding players, running ahead and kicking out those kick-out passes to them. On defense, what I wrote about him was that, what he does to stay on the court is that he just has good size, again, where he can play, he can guard point guards, shooting guards. He can also switch onto some wings as well, in different defensive schemes. He also just stays with his assignment. He does a good job of again, from the tape that I watched, Rutgers didn't really have him as one of the point attack defenders guarding like the best offensive playmakers outside. But what he does is he kind of stays like those wing corner shooters, and he does a good job just staying with those players, watching his peripheral vision, making sure that he's always near them and kind of staying in between. And I would say one of the highlights that he has defensively, one of his skills, is that he's good about blowing up passing lanes, where he can kind of stay within the ball and his man, and he's kind of always kind of scanning, keeping his body in between that window. And then if he sees that the pass is there, he's not afraid to kind of just go in, jump at that pass, get a deflection or a steal, and then take it down court for a dunk or a layup. That's where I saw a lot of his steals come from, was not really like guarding the player one-on-one. It was more so blowing up those passing lanes. The second question that Dean wrote in that book is the second question is, what causes the player to fail? Again, I didn't see too many deficiencies in Harper's game. But the two areas that I saw were more so on the offensive end were turnover issues. There's times when, again, he's a young player. He was only 18 starting his season, where he kind of like drives inside and into like multiple players, and then they kind of rip the ball from him, kind of steal it, or he stopped his dribble going inside, or whenever teams basically double teamed him or trapped him at times, he had trouble doing that, kind of getting out of that situation, ends up throwing the ball away or gets tipped or something like that. So again, that's expected from a young player, to have some turnover issues, especially with he and Ace Bailey being the two go-to players for Rutgers. Defense were scheming to try to stop them at all costs. That was kind of the defensive game plan. And then I would say too, the fact that he shot 33% from three, his shot can be inconsistent. What I mean by that is that he'll have games where he goes like 1 of 5 from three, in multiple times when you look at his game log. But then he has games where he goes like 4 of 7, 5 of 8. He has games where he makes multiple threes. So again, I would just say it's that inconsistent shooting, but he does have good form on his jump shot. Like I mentioned, his shot looks very similar to like De'Aaron Fox or James Harden because he's a lefty. And then also, I would say too, I think part of this is just the tape that I watched, but some of the games when he's off ball defensively, he's not really as engaged or like, he's not losing his man, but he's also not like, scrambling or like, just constantly staying in plays or trying to disrupt things. That's kind of an issue that I watched as well. And then the third question that Dean asked in that book is, who are the comps for the player? Who does he play like is the question. So here's my comps. My comps were very much like De'Aaron Fox when he's pushing the ball up the floor, when he's able to, shoot that pull up three. I saw, and also his mid-range shot when he goes straight to the pull up. I saw a little bit of James Harden with him in the way he's able to, when he runs a pick and roll, and two defenders go up to trap him, he can split that trap and get inside and finish with layups or floaters. I also, like I said, I saw Harden a lot in his step back jumper. That shot, because he's a lefty, looks very much like James Harden. And then the last player I saw a lot of in his game was Cade Cunningham, and not necessarily about like how he shoots or drives or anything. It's more so his pace. He plays kind of at his own pace. He's not too much in a rush. Kind of like kind of feeling the game out, very much like Cade. Not afraid to reset something. Not if the defense is playing him a certain way. So that's where I saw more Cade Cunningham. Some other writers like Kevin O'Connor, Jonathan Wasserman in Draft Room, they see players like Darren Williams in his game, Drew Holiday, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson, and Kobe White. And then lastly, this week at the draft combine, Harper was actually asked, who do you play like, or who do you think you play like? And he said James Harden, Cade Cunningham, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So again, that's even who Harper sees in himself as he kind of maybe who he models his game after, or who he kind of thinks he plays like. He just said like a big guard, like those players. Now, the question about his role, let's just say the Spurs do draft him. I think that if the coaching staff gives that opportunity, I think he can battle Stephon Castle for that starting shooting guard spot. So let me explain this. So of course, De'Aaron Fox will be the starting point guard. At the 2, you most likely have Castle going in. Then you have Devin Vassell at the 3, Harrison Barnes at the 4, and Wemby at the 5. Again, this is assuming that the Spurs don't make any kind of trades or anything like that. Add different players to the team. Now, here's why I say that I think he can compete with Castle. Let me just say kind of like what they both bring. So they're both obviously dynamic scoring guards. I will say Castle has the upper hand in these areas where he has the experience. He's already played his rookie year, so he kind of knows what to expect from the NBA game. I will say I think Castle's a more dynamic passer than Harper, where he sees different angles. He can throw more difficult passes, like being on the strong side, throwing to the weak side with one hand, over his shoulder. And then also I think that defensively, Castle's a better, on-ball defender, where the Spurs, can trust putting him on different players, from like Steph Curry to Devin Booker. He's one of those point of attack defenders. Really, that's what he's known for, is his defense. So again, I think that's where Castle has the upper hand and why he's probably going to get the starting job. However, here's why Harper, I think, has a chance to compete for that second spot. It's because of, again, he kind of brings that same scoring volume to the Spurs, where he can score inside, he can get to the free throw line, and then also I think that he's just a better outside shooter coming in from where Castle was a year ago, even where Castle finished this past season. I think that with the looks he's going to get from the Spurs by the fact that De'Aaron Fox and Wemby draw so many defenders their way, he's going to get better shots. And from what I saw on the tape, he shot better from the spot up 3 than he did maybe those pull up threes or step back threes. So I think the shooting really gives him the edge there to possibly get into the starting lineup. But again, overall, I do think that Castle will be the starting shooting guard, barring any kind of significant changes to the roster. Now, even if Harper doesn't get into the starting lineup, he's still going to be able to get a lot of minutes and play in different lineups. And so again, I think he would by letting him come off the bench, he would get to play alongside either Blake Wesley, where Harper would be like the 2, or he could play alongside Julian Champagnie, where Harper's like the backup point guard. And this at least allows him to kind of learn the NBA game with less pressure, I would say, just because, he's getting to go against second units there, kind of filling in for either Castle or Fox. Plus, in different lineups, I think he'd get to play alongside Fox or alongside Castle. And then I think Coach Mitch Johnson could be very, because of the fact that all 3 players are scoring guards and they're versatile scoring guards, they can move the ball. Defensively, they're not going to lose their man. I think that if Coach Johnson wants in certain lineups, he can just have all 3 guards out there, a trio of 3 guards, and see what they can do out there. And so I think that because they're versatile players and Harper is very comfortable playing off the ball along with Castle, I think that would work as well, just to throw out some different lineups with 3 guards if they need to. And so in the long term, again, next season, I see him most likely as the backup point guard. But then in the long term, the Spurs can have Harper and Castle on the roster while still having Fox. And then let's just say that, Fox signs a 4-year extension this coming off season. He plays until age 31. Then at that time, the Spurs can determine, do they want to continue with him, or do they want to give this backcourt, just make the Harper Fox backcourt, not the Harper Fox, Harper Castle backcourt, the backcourt of the future. And those 2 players will still be, very, very young, not even reaching like the prime stage of their career yet. And so that could, again, that's the overall goal, is to have Harper and Castle become the Spurs' backcourt of the future, down the road, once maybe Fox is starting to, exit his prime years from now. So again, I think that's kind of where Harper would fit, and that's what I wrote about over there on the spotupshot.com. I do want to mention that I'm also going to be writing one more scouting report on a top 5 pick, and that's going to be Ace Bailey, who is mocked 3rd, just to kind of see I've already started that process, but I just wanted to see where's his game at, who is he as a player coming in, and answer some of those questions that I asked about Harper. All right, so for our last topic, I just kind of want to map out the rest of the offseason until the NBA draft in late June. So let's just talk about some of the big things that you'll kind of see here in the coming weeks. Of course, the Giannis news is something to watch. Does he stay with Milwaukee or does he not? And if he says he's not staying there, then of course you're probably going to see the Spurs' name in different rumors. Now that the draft combine has wrapped up, it wrapped up on Sunday. The Spurs and other teams are allowed to start now, like working out players or start having them in their gyms for like interviews and things like that. So that's kind of what we'll start seeing is more so like some players that are working out with teams in the next month, and then also interviews from players that have been interviewed by teams. Then on June 15th, that's a key date for the draft, because that is called the draft withdrawal deadline. So this is basically the last chance for any of these college players to go back to their former schools if they don't want to, go forward with the draft. And this usually happens for players who maybe want to be a first round pick, but they're kind of projecting in the second round. So maybe they think they have a better chance next year. So they might go back to school. So again, that's the date on June 15th for players to kind of go back into the draft, go back to college instead of going forward with the draft. And then of course, late in June, on June 25th and 26th, it's a 2-night event. The NBA draft will take place. First round on June 25th, second round on June 26th, and then a few days after that, the free agency begins on July 1st. All right, so before I close this episode, don't forget to visit spotupshot.com. Again, now I'm in the stage of, now that we know what picks the Spurs are going to have, I am starting to write my scouting reports. Like I said, the first one is up over on the spotupshot.com on Dylan Harper, so you can check that out over on the spotupshot.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Spot Up Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spot Up Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.